Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dream Big Mentorships webinar series. We're very lucky tonight to have two outstanding leaders with us. We have Tyler Arnold from the Cincinnati, Ohio area, and we have Hal Roberts, which is east of Dallas in Texas, with us tonight. I am going to share with you, those who are joining live, make sure you go down and click on the chat button and join us. So Hal and Tyler and the rest of the participants, we can chat with you during the live conversation. And those of you who are joining us on the replay, make sure that you join us and follow along on the Dream Big Mentorship website or the hashtag Aspiring Leaders, so you can see upcoming webinars. Next week, we have another exciting webinar about resumes, cover letters, and portfolios with Jennifer Hogan and Elise Consiglio. So I am going to turn my mic off and quickly turn it over to our two guest hosts. I'm very excited to have these two gentlemen with us tonight. We have a wide, you'll see why I paired these two together, because we have the spectrum tonight of two different types of administrators, where they are, and they're going to share with you everything how they prepared for their leadership roles. So gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for your time, your dedication to the profession, and take it away from here. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tyler. You go first.
All right. Hi, guys. Tyler Arnold. I am in year 2 as an administrator. I'm down in Cincinnati, as previously noted. Winton Woods High School, serving 1,300 students. My population I work with, I'm lower house, which is 9 and 10, but my focus is 9th graders. So I get all the kids coming up from the middle school who need to be trained in the ways of high school. I'm excited to share the floor tonight, and I'll let Hal take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm a retired school superintendent after 38 years in education, with 30 of those in some kind of leadership role. As far as my leadership, I started off as an athletic director and went from there to be an elementary teacher, and then elementary principal, to a high school principal at 2 campuses, an assistant superintendent, and finally a superintendent of a K-8 district, where I eventually created a high school. And after 4 years, we went from a little over 300 students to over 750 students in a K-12 campus. So that is me. I've done it a lot. I've done a lot, but I haven't seen it all. So we're just going to go from there. And Tyler, I'll let you go first. And anybody else that's watching, you can ask questions. We really encourage that.
So when we talk about aspiring leadership, in my mind, since I'm so new to it, I really looked at the opportunities as a teacher, as a coach, that I could take on so that I could understand some of the nuances. When you enter or get your first assistant principal role or athletic director role, you're going to be overwhelmed. But for me, it was the process of really learning under the tutelage, and Jody and I were talking about it, when I helped found Worthington Academy, which is an online alternative school for kids in Worthington who just needed a choice. It could be that they were credit deficient all the way. We had kids who were working with the Columbus Zoo and had to get out at certain times to go to those opportunities. For me, when I took the role, I told the administrator I really wanted to be in charge of the teacher-based team, and I really wanted to kind of get in his ear and try and learn everything I could from that perspective of school leadership. And it was a great opportunity for me, because the following year, I was able to take over a similar school that served about 200 kids in the alternative setting, and it was a great experience. Did I learn everything I needed to know? No. Because now that I'm in a school of 1,300 that's more traditional, as Hal said, you're learning something new every day. And I will say that you just have to take each and every opportunity as a learning experience. Sometimes you're going to not make the right call, but as long as you're willing to learn from those calls and say, I'm going to do it right next time, you're on the right track.
As I said, my first leadership role was an athletic director, and just a little bit of background on that. I played college football and 1 year in the NFL, and played a bunch of sports in high school. And so being an athletic director was managing coaches was my biggest deal. As far as everything else, I kind of could handle. But my biggest leap was coming from being an athletic director at a high school to serving as a principal of a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade campus. It was me and the secretary and 33 women. And so that was a culture shock, so to speak. But one thing about preparing for leadership roles, number one, what you're doing right now is awesome. I wish I could have had something like this to kind of lay a foundation for me. Number two, if you're on Twitter, participate in as many Twitter chats as you can, because there's some really awesome and amazing educators on there. And then number three, once you start making application, try to find out as much about that particular school as you can, from demographics to performance to, if you can find about their culture, be a step up of those that are vying for that same position. So, but the one thing above everything else, once you get into a leadership role, make creating healthy, safe relationships as a foundation for your leadership, and let everything else emanate from there.
I would have to agree with you there. When we talk about opportunities, I know that previous districts I came from, being a dean was an option. You were kind of a teacher on special assignment. And that's probably one of the less glamorous jobs you can get, from the simple fact that you're dealing with a lot of discipline. But at the same time, you're forging those relationships with those kids who may be the toughest ones that you're going to deal with. I never got the opportunity to be a dean, but in my current role, I kind of feel like that sometimes, because a lot of it has to do with that that discipline piece. But as Hal and I previously were talking about, it's also about the relationships you build with the adults when you get into this position. So many times we kind of get isolated in our own classrooms. We forget that we're part of a bigger landscape. So at my school, I have 133 other teachers and educators I have to work with. And so for me, it's making sure that I build those bonds with those adults just like I would with the kids. And so being able to, keep that positive rapport, as Hal said, build those relationships is so valuable. Because, again, today it's a colleague, tomorrow it could be somebody else, but we just want to continue to push forward and build that opportunity to be able to build that positive culture for our students. And that's really what, for me, leadership comes down to, is, and Hal said it too, it's the relationship piece. If you don't care about kids and you don't care about the people you work with, you're not going to be successful in this profession.
Yeah, and one thing that it's not a big deal, but I wrote a book on educational leadership called Power It On. And since then, I'm in the process of rewriting it. And one of the chapters that I'm writing about is humility. And the reason why I share that with y'all is that in today's educational landscape, it seems like there's kind of an uprising on social emotional health of your kids. And so I got to thinking, if it's good enough for our kids, adults are humans too. And so realizing the social emotional aspect for adults may be more important than anything else you can do as being a leader. So as you study that piece on social emotional health with your kids, kind of think about that on how you can apply that to adults as well, because the relationship piece is probably the biggest. One of the things that I talk about is leading fearlessly, or leading with courage. And the Latin root word for courage is cor, C-O-R, and that means heart. And so I write about leading from the heart as well as leading from the mind. And as you lead from the mind, at least for me, it was about data, about performance, about what could go wrong. But leading from the heart is about relationships and feelings and what could go right, or what could be significant as far as a leadership role could be. So that was just something that I thought that just came to me today. So I'm glad that I'm able to share with y'all that today.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Hal, I mean, we invest so much into kids that sometimes we forget that our adults are just as important. They're a vital piece in this this process. And, you know, I will say as a young administrator, I definitely struggled with that. I will say year one, I almost put students above teachers. And it was hard to get my teachers back. And again, I was at a program of 200. We had 8 total staff members. And I had to physically tell them, tell me what's going on, let me know. And I was honest with them. I apologized. As you said, I took ownership of the situation and said, I need to do better for you guys. Coming into my new role, I told myself that, you know, I was going to do everything in my power to make sure to keep that healthy balance. Is it ever, you know, it's really hard to keep a healthy balance because you're dealing with 2 different personalities in terms of an adult and a child. But at the same time, everybody wants to know that you appreciate the things that they're doing and that you care about them.
One of the things that I just started writing about, and maybe that you can even do it in your present position now, is journaling at the end of the day. And all I suggest you do is, okay, what went right? What could I improve on? What are my plans for tomorrow? And what was really big today, if there was something? And it would be really interesting to go back after a month or so and look to see how you progress through this, because I've done a lot of research on neuroscience and how the brain works and how the brain learns. And I have a presentation on brain-friendly teaching strategies. And one of the things that's really important, and maybe even in your present position, is to have kids write at the end of the lesson either a question that they have about it or something that they've learned, or maybe an aha moment that they experienced. And that works the same with adults as the kids. And going back to the relationship piece, the one thing that opens the brain for learning is emotion. And the best way to touch the emotions with somebody is through telling stories. And so as you and in your classroom, if you're able to share personal experiences about what is relevant to your particular topic that day, it's a great way to open the brain, and it's also the best way for long-term memory. So in the same vein, when I was leading a campus or leading a district, I often told stories. And I didn't realize that I was being able to get inside their brain when I was doing that, but that is such an important piece that one thing that you could, if you don't know about brain-friendly strategies, start digging into that, because it not only works with the classroom, but it also works with adults as well.
Definitely. I'm going to sidetrack a little bit on that. When we talk about just some keys that I've learned and things of that nature, a big one is just how important trust is. And that goes back into that relationship piece. When we talk about trust as leaders, if you get into that position, you have to be the first to trust. And it's not always easy. You have to trust that your people, your staff are going to do what's best for kids. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have those tough conversations at times, but people have to know that you trust them sometimes before they trust you. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, for myself as a young leader sometimes is to do, because I'm so, I would say, type A, like I want to control everything. I have to be able to say, you know, I'm no longer in the classroom, but I trust you as the adult to control your spheres the way we've talked about it and we've set things up. And my expectation, just like yours, is to do what's best for kids.
One of the things that through all of my reading and research is I narrowed leadership down to one word, and that is influence. And if you can't influence, you can't lead. And the way that you reach influence is what Tyler was just talking about, is that you have your staff trust you. Excuse me. And the thing about trust, it's only rented. You never earn it. You have to earn it every day. Mm-hmm. And you build on that trust through those relationships that we talked about that earlier. But that is I'm glad you brought that up, Tyler, because that is a big piece in leadership. Because if they don't trust you, they're not going to let you influence them. Mm-hmm. So and the way to get that is through building those relationships. One of the first things that I did at each campus and district that I went to is I got the previous year's yearbook and looked at the teachers, looked at the names under the faces so that when they walked in the building, I could identify them and call them by name. As you know personally, no matter where you are, your name is very powerful when somebody says it. And so just like it is with your kids in your classroom, it's just as important with adults under your leadership, is that you recognize them by name and call them by name. And something good about them. One of the each campus that I led, I had them come in during a conference period, and we didn't talk about school, curriculum, or anything. It was only about them and their family and who they are as a person. And I had a form that they filled out with their picture. I wanted a picture of their kids, their birthday, where I could hand deliver a birthday note to them each time. And that did a whole lot as far as building bridges of trust and relationships.
I'll piggyback off that. I'm not as detailed as you at this point in that one. As I try and continue to learn, the traditions at this school and the culture, I've done thank you notes, personalized thank you notes to each staff member I try and do about 2 a week, but I also do little stickers that say Supreme, and at the end of every one of them, I say, you're a Supreme educator. And that's done wonders for me, for them to really feel like, oh, wow, thanks for noticing it. It's opened up the lines of communication. I try and do my best to talk to everybody I'm in the halls. But, the new guy, you have to kind of get to feel out. But this has really given me that in with a lot of the teachers to have those conversations. And it's just done wonders for at least where I'm at in terms of building that relationship, as you talked about, Hal. I think next step would be great to be able to have those personalized conferences. It may take a little while with 133 people, but I think, like you're saying, it's worth it in the end. But any little gesture I think you can do to show that you care, that you notice the things that they're doing, because let's be honest, sometimes you feel isolated. You feel like you're in your own little world as a teacher. We're in the month of February, and February can be one of those blah months where you start to feel down. And that's really why I picked it up this month, is because I want my teachers to feel great about what they're doing. I want them to know what they're doing is amazing, because that's going to be reflected in the way they approach kids and the way they approach their lessons. They're excited about things, and that just kind of puts that fire underneath them.
One of the things that I did, those of you that are aspiring and get an interview, one thing that I always tried to do is, if there was one person, 2 or 3 on an interview committee, is find out their name and send a thank you note to them after the end of the interview. I believe that got me my superintendent's job. One of the things that this particular district had is they had a video on what they look for in a superintendent. And what I did is I went back and addressed each one of those attributes, concerns, expectations that they had in that video, hand wrote a note to each one of them and gave them a notebook that had that inside of it. Another thing that just brought to my attention, when you go into an interview, don't go in empty-handed. Whether you have sent a resume or not, bring a resume and anything else about that particular school, campus, district that you can think of, how you can make it better, and hand that to each one on the interview team. It's good to find out who's on that team and their position so that you can address it in that manner, whether it's a curriculum person, whether it be an assistant principal, or even superintendent. So handwritten notes are gold, y'all. And it's a lost art today. People think if they just send an email of a thank you, that's going to work. That's a good starting point, but handwritten notes are just so valuable.
And I think you bring up a powerful point when we talk about when we're going into those interviews, knowing the school. I think it's knowing how to phrase it, because I've been dumb enough to say, well, I noticed you do this not very well. as opposed to saying, I'm the guy that has said that. So you bring up that good point that you really have to spin it. This is what I bring to the table. This is how I can help contribute to your vision, mission, and things of that nature. And it goes a long way if they know that you're really diving into that information. It shows that you're serious about what you're trying to do. Something that I would, adding on to that, some things that I would include is looking at your student population in terms of depth of information like ESL. That's our biggest thing right now for our district. And the reason I had such a understanding of ESL and the nuances of that, I really played off of that, which I wouldn't say ended up getting me the job, but I think it was a strong selling point because ESL is one of these populations that if you don't interact with it all the time, you kind of forget about it. And being able to have that in my back pocket, that I've come from such suburban and urban districts where the population's exploding, that's really helped me understand the nuances and ways to interact with the families and the students.
A recent book that I read in the last several months is called Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain by Zaretta Hammond. If you've not read that book, you need to. But the thing that's, like I said, my latest passion is brain research. And she addresses brains as far as the culture that those kids are around. And even if you can find out the culture of their original country, so to speak, if they're truly African Americans, you need to find out what part of Africa, if you can, because each country, just like your culture in the North is different than my culture in Texas. And the culture of a Black person is different than a culture of a white person. And so the more that you can find out about this, you can make more relevance in your classroom, in your topics, by remembering the culture from which they come. And obviously, if it works with kids, you can really work that with adults as well. It's Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain by Zaretta Hammond. That's the name of that book, Jody. What else, Tyler? What else can we think about? Any of you guys out there?
I would add that you got to realize your the likelihood of you, I don't know, landing your first position. Personally speaking, I just feel like it's one of those things where you just got to keep trying, no matter what. Even if it's practicing within your own district with people and things of that nature, just to be prepared, because I feel like opportunity, when it strikes, you need to be ready. You may not feel like you're ready, but if you don't take that opportunity and that leap of faith, I always looked at it from the perspective that, could I do more for my students? And at the time when I was a classroom teacher, I had 120 kids, 150 kids I would see in a day. And I was like, man, that's awesome. That's phenomenal. But I knew that there was more for me. There was more of an opportunity. And that's something you always have to think about. Can I impact people more? Will it be a shell shock? Yeah, because I previously noted, and Hal and I talked about earlier, is like, you're not just impacting kids anymore. It's adults. It's stakeholders. It's, families. It's people in the community. When you jump into a leadership role, you're representing more than just your classroom now. You're representing your school and your district on an even bigger level. And it can be overwhelming at times, but at the same time, programs like this help you understand, like, you're going to make mistakes, but at the same time, there are people there to support you and push you along the way.
One thing that I will encourage you is, as you're sending out your resume to job openings, don't sell yourself short. Don't necessarily say, well, I need to be an assistant principal before I'm a principal. Because I went straight from being athletic director to principal. I never experienced being an assistant principal. Did that hurt me? Maybe a little bit, but I don't think too much. On the other hand, never turn down an interview, because every interview you will learn something. You'll learn how to answer questions. You'll learn what kind of questions that might come about. But any chance you get, go for it and go for an interview. Don't ever turn one down, because you never know that might be your district or your campus that you're going to be the right fit.
Definitely. Let's see any questions.
Anything else? I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Hal L. Roberts. I'm also on Instagram at the same. Also, I'm a boxer at Hal Roberts. And let me see, I'm on LinkedIn at Hal Roberts. And so all of those places you can get a hold of me or follow me.
Any questions? Let's see.
I love what you're doing. That is fascinating. Did you know that I can tell the upline levels of soil just by tasting it?
All right. Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to add your Twitter handles to the screen if it's okay with you, when we close this down and post it to YouTube and our website. And I want to thank both of you for your time tonight. I know you're both family men with family and young kids, Tyler. So thank you for your time. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for all of this. Thank you for being mentors to our cohort. And we're just excited. This information is always so helpful. Thank you for those of you who joined us live. And again, we'll see you next week when we talk about resumes and cover letters. Thanks, everyone.
It was a pleasure.
See you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
What?